It was the year 2003. I was only 8 years old. It was a Saturday, and I had planned to spend the entire day at home, completely absorbed in Spyro, Year of the Dragon on my PlayStation. My dad usually worked on weekends, while my mom worked Monday through Friday. On those days, she would always take the chance to run her weekly errands and pick up groceries. My parents had a strict rule about not leaving me alone for too long, an hour at most until I was a bit older. But that morning, as my mom prepared to head to the store, she asked if I wanted to come with her. Normally I agreed, because I could sneak a few candy bars into the cart. But that day, I was far too invested in my game. I begged her to let me stay home. She sighed, but agreed, on one condition: that I finish my chores before she got back. I nodded quickly, thrilled, and she left. No more than 10 minutes later, I heard the front door open and close. At first, I thought my mom had forgotten her keys or sunglasses. But then came the sound of footsteps, heavy, louder than hers. From the kitchen, I heard the cupboards opening and shutting. A chill ran down my spine. That's not Mom. Maybe Dad had come home from work unexpectedly? I paused my game and walked cautiously toward the kitchen. The sight that met me made my entire body freeze. Standing there was a gigantic man I had never seen before. He was calmly pouring himself a cup of coffee from our pot, which had stayed warm since the morning. His frame was massive, easily 6'5", weighing well over 280 pounds. He had a long gray beard and mustache, and over his clothes he wore one of those bright yellow safety vests that construction workers wear on the job. He looked at me, smiled faintly, and said in a calm, almost soothing tone, "Oh, hey there, little man. Just grabbing a cup of coffee before I head back to work." His voice was too relaxed, too wrong. I managed to stammer out a question. "What are you doing in our house?" Without hesitation, he replied, "I'm a friend of your dad's, just stopping by for a quick minute." Something deep inside me screamed lie. But I was only a child, and instead of pressing him further, I muttered, "Okay," and hurried back to my room, locking the door behind me. For several long minutes, I heard him moving around, sipping coffee as though he belonged there. Then came a knock at my bedroom door. His voice followed. "I'm heading out now, sport. Tell your dad thanks for the coffee. I'll see him Monday." The front door shut, and from my window, I watched as he strolled casually down the street until he was out of sight. When Mom came back from the store, I told her everything in a rush. Her face drained of all color. First, she called my dad at work. He was an engineer in a small tool and die shop, and none of his co-workers wore construction vests. Then she called the police. I gave a statement to the responding officer, describing the man in detail. But we never heard anything back. No updates, no arrests, nothing. Mom swore she had locked the door that morning, as she always did, which meant one of two things. Either she had somehow forgotten, or that man had unlocked it himself without leaving a single trace. After that, we invested in an expensive home security system, and from that day forward, I never again argued about going to the store with my mom. Because one thing still haunts me to this day. That man did not come for the coffee. He came to see how easy it would be to walk into our home, and maybe, one day, to come back again. I was 25 when it happened. Even now, looking back, I can't fully believe the night unfolded the way it did. I had always carried a sense of unease, as if something shadowed me even in my own home. Smoking weed was supposed to help me sleep, but instead it fueled something darker inside me. This wasn't cute paranoia. This was the kind that made me feel like someone was hiding in the corners of my apartment. Eventually, my fear grew into a strange habit. I began hiding knives all over my place. One in particular, a large butcher's knife with an orange cover, ended up forgotten at the bottom of my purse. I stopped questioning why it was there until the night it became the only thing standing between me and something far worse. It was a Friday evening. I had stayed late at work after being forced to cover for a coworker who disappeared. By the time I left, the streets were empty and oppressively quiet. That's when I noticed him. A man in dark clothes, a cap, and a jacket far too heavy for the weather. At first, nothing seemed odd, until he shifted his pace, moved behind me, and then crossed the street. With every step, the silence thickened, pressing against me. My skin prickled, my stomach dropped, and my instincts screamed, "This isn't normal." My hand slipped into my purse, brushing against the cold handle of that knife. When I pulled it free, the blade caught the streetlight, and suddenly, I wasn't prey anymore. He hadn't expected this. I could see it in the way his body stiffened when his eyes fell on the knife. He stepped back. I stepped forward. Something primitive surged inside me, and before I even realized what I was doing, I charged at him. He panicked, stumbling, trying to flee. The knife sliced through the fabric of his coat as he tore away, and that tiny snag was enough to send him into full-blown terror. I chased him, laughing, watching him stumble, limp, and glance back with wide, terrified eyes. In that moment, I wasn't the helpless girl walking home. I was the thing he feared, and I loved it. But then a single thought cut through the madness. What are you going to do if you catch him? And just like that, everything collapsed. My legs shook, my hands trembled, the adrenaline drained away, leaving only raw panic. He disappeared around the corner, leaving me with the terrifying realization of what I had just done. I ran home, locked the door, and crumbled onto the kitchen floor. Water spilled down my face as I tried to drink with shaking hands. Tears burned my eyes as reality set in. I could have been hurt, arrested, or something even worse. My paranoia had saved me, yes, but it had also unleashed something reckless and dangerous inside me. That night, I swore off it all. No more weed, no more vaping, no more feeding that darkness. I threw it all away. All except the knife. I couldn't bring myself to discard it. It still lies hidden in one of my bags, silent, waiting. And sometimes, late at night, I imagine that man, whoever he was and whatever his intentions had been, still wakes up in cold sweats, because he remembers the night his victim became the hunter. April 30th, 2019. That date is carved into my memory. I was staying at the Crossroads Hotel in Kansas City, Missouri. Work had me stuck there for 2 long weeks, and while the weekdays kept me occupied, the weekends were slow, heavy, and lonely. Being in a strange city with no friends made the silence feel even sharper. So, around 9 p.m., I decided to head down to the hotel bar for a beer, just to pass the time. I had only placed my order, I hadn't even touched a drink yet, when I felt a slight tug on my shirt. I turned. A woman stood beside me. She was strikingly attractive, but her voice wasn't flirtatious when she leaned close. It was urgent, whispered hot against my ear. "Please, pretend to be my boyfriend. That man is acting really creepy." At first, I thought she was playing some kind of game, but the look in her eyes told me otherwise. They were wide, unsettled, pleading. And then I saw him. Seated nearby was a man in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. He rocked slowly back and forth on the bar stool, eyes half closed, face slack with drunkenness. But what stood out most, he was wearing a full tuxedo, formal attire in the dim corner of a hotel bar long after the party was over. When I asked about it, he explained in a slurry voice that his daughter had just gotten married. The family had booked a block of rooms upstairs, and he was still running the reception tab at the bar. On the surface, it seemed harmless, until he began openly hitting on the woman we'll call Rachel. His words were sticky, his gaze unsettling. Rachel slid closer to me, wrapping her arms around my waist, and said sweetly, "Yes, this is my boyfriend. I love him. I'd kill for him." The man swayed again, then said something that made the air freeze. No, I've killed for love before." Rachel and I locked eyes. My pulse hammered. I asked carefully, "Excuse me, what did you just say?" His glassy stare sharpened, just for a moment. I said, "I've killed for love before." And then he began to explain, too calmly, too vividly. He spoke of his ex-wife, of her new husband, the man he despised, of the day he snapped. He described pulling out a Glock 37, 3 shots, 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. He described the body, wrapped in black plastic bags, weighed down and tossed into the lake behind his house one morning while the neighbors still slept. Every detail etched itself into my brain. The stench of alcohol on his breath, the glisten of sweat on his forehead, the hollow silence between his sentences. Rachel's grip on my hand turned bone white. My inside screamed, "He's not joking. He's confessing." Then he fell silent. His eyes shifted, narrowing with suspicion, as if he realized he'd said too much. The atmosphere grew heavy, suffocating. I knew we had to leave before his attention turned darker. So I did something quick, almost instinctive. I shook his hand, introduced myself, and he gave me his full name. I repeated it in my head until I was certain I wouldn't forget. The next morning, I asked the hotel front desk if anyone by that name was staying there. The clerk, a friend from my years of traveling, confirmed it. Yes, someone with that name was indeed checked in. I called the Kansas City Police Department's tip hotline and gave them everything I had. They issued me a tipster ID number. Every month since then, I've checked for updates, hoping for news. But nothing. No arrest, no case. Was he just messing with us, trying to scare strangers in a bar? Or had alcohol loosened his tongue enough to spill a real hidden truth? I'll never know for sure. But that night, I was sober, and I remember every word. Sometimes, late at night, I still feel his breath close to my ear, see his unfocused eyes, and hear that chilling voice whispering through the haze of memory. I've killed for love before. In the fall of 1974, my grandmother was just 30 years old, juggling 4 jobs to support my childhood. Life was a constant grind, but she had an iron work ethic and took pride in every shift she worked. One of her jobs was as a hostess at a high-end steakhouse called Moonraker, a restaurant known for its elite clientele and steady stream of regulars. Businessmen, socialites, politicians, and even the occasional celebrity frequented the place. But for my grandmother, one man stood out above all. He was new in town, and every Thursday without fail, this handsome, well-dressed man would arrive. He never just walked in. He always called ahead to ensure his preferred table and waiter were ready. The same table, the same waiter, every week. The table had a perfect view of the entrance, but was close to the back exit. He was polite, never flirtatious, never rude. His voice was warm, confident, disarming. He always greeted my grandmother by name, asked how she was, made small talk before she led him to his table. For months, this routine never changed. But one Thursday, he didn't show. The next Thursday, no show. And the next, he was gone. No call, no reservation, no explanation. At first, my grandmother thought perhaps he had left town, or maybe he had grown bored of the restaurant. It was Utah after all. Life went on. What she didn't know was far darker. While she greeted this charming stranger every week, he had been hunting women in the very same city. And because of him, one of her co-workers would never return. Months later, his face appeared all over the news. The man who smiled at my grandmother every Thursday, who knew her by name, who watched the door like a hawk, had vanished without a trace. His name was Ted Bundy. By then, the whole country knew it, and now my grandmother did too. At first, it didn't feel real. She had met plenty of men like him, smooth, confident, charming, capable of playing the part of the perfect gentleman. But the details kept coming back. How he never missed a Thursday. How he preferred the non-smoking section, as if he couldn't stand the haze clouding his view of the entrance. How he always ordered many bottles of hard liquor, drinking just enough to loosen up, but never enough to lose control. Every single week, she watched his light tan Volkswagen Beetle roll into the parking lot. The same lot where Carol Duranch had been abducted, a young woman who barely escaped Bundy after he posed as a police officer. And then there was her co-worker, the girl who went missing that fall. At first, it seemed like another tragedy, one you wish you could ignore. But later, she was found dead near Salt Lake City Airport, murdered. And in that moment, my grandmother realized she had been unknowingly brushing shoulders with a predator. She later admitted she was grateful she wasn't his type. She wasn't a small, cute girl back then, and if she had been, who knows what might have happened. The thought stayed with her. She had been part of his weekly routine. Bundy didn't just walk in and eat. He studied the room, knew exactly where to sit, with a perfect line of sight to the doors and the exit. He blended in perfectly, never raising suspicion. When he left, he walked out into the night, into the city he called home, beginning his hunt. For months, he smiled at her, shook his hand, made casual conversation, all while carrying the darkest secret imaginable. He wasn't just a regular, he was a serial killer, sitting comfortably in a restaurant every Thursday, hiding in plain sight. Even now, though he was gone, the cold trace of his presence lingered in her memory, like a shadow that would never leave.